I thought that I would take a moment and recount one of the most truly bizarre and terrifying things that ever happened to me. It happened back in the summer of 2017. I was but an eager and ignorant 20-year-old that had hoped for a day where I wasn't taking orders at my job at the local Pizza Hut. On one of my very rare days off, I was enjoying relaxing by the pool in my parents' backyard when I heard a strange rustling somewhere off in the distance. When I turned towards the sound, I was shocked to see a young, beautiful woman standing at the edge of the woods that border my parents' property line. She was about 5 feet tall, with bleached blonde hair that fell to her waist, with blue eyes that pierced my soul. Her hands were behind her back, and the outfit she wore looked as though she was a 1950s housewife. "Can I help you?" I asked her. I wasn't really afraid of her. She seemed to be in her early 20s, and she didn't look as though she was homeless. Once I'd spoken to her, she gave me a freakishly big smile, which revealed all of her teeth, and even some of her gum lining. "I just moved in next door," she sweetly replied in an overly girly voice. Without removing her eyes from me, she moved her arm to her left to point towards her house. I followed her movements and was surprised to see that there was a house so close to ours. As I thought about it, I never remembered there being a house anywhere near ours. I was just about to object when I turned to look at her and found that she was now standing 2 feet away from me. The moment I had my sights locked on her, I noticed that she was still smiling like crazy and seemed to have been trying to reach out to me. The moment I turned my head back to her, her arm flew right back behind her and out of sight. "Well, it was nice to meet you," I said as calm as I could, before taking a few steps backward, as I was now starting to head back to my parents' house. "What's your name?" the strange woman asked, completely unaware of how uncomfortable I was. William," I lied to her. She seemed to be spazzing out, and the last thing I wanted was for the crazy lady to have my real name. "William," she responded in confusion before she turned her gaze towards the ground and began repeating my name under her breath for a solid minute. "You are?" I asked, as kindly as I could, although my senses told me to run away. "Barbie," she answered in rapid-fire fashion. It was obvious she was proud of her name. Once I heard her name, it became apparent to me that she did actually look like a real-life Barbie doll. Turning my gaze quickly at her house that had seemingly appeared, I realized that it was a bright neon pink color. Averting my gaze back to her, my heart stopped beating. My breathing halted. She was gone. Completely gone. I thought that I had hallucinated for a moment, before deciding to confirm that her house really was next to my folks. But when I looked back, it was gone. Finally, my feet regained their sanity, and I began sprinting back to the house. I turned to look at where she had been, just to make sure she wasn't there any longer. It was still a desolate area next to the woods. As I reached the house, I turned my attention to the sliding glass door that stood between me and safety. Yet as soon as I turned, I saw her standing in front of my exit. With a deft motion, she swung something at my head, causing me to collapse. Darkness filled my vision, and the void around me left me numb. When I came back to my senses, it was obvious that I was in her home. Everything was pink, from the floor to the ceiling. At first, I thought that maybe I was just accidentally knocked out, or maybe she was a desperate, lonely woman just seeking some form of companionship. "No thanks, lady. I'll be okay." I didn't realize the truth of my situation until I turned and looked at the wall behind me. My heart froze. On the wall looked to be smeared blood. Rusty chains dangled down from the ceiling, and what looked like marks from a whip were streaked across the wall, ceiling, and floor. Before I could really come to terms with what might be happening to me, I saw Barbie enter the room and stare at me with a predatory smile. "What do you want?" I asked her in a panic. The bindings that had been placed on me were tight, but not too tight that I couldn't manage to break free of them in time. "I don't have much money, unless you're looking for me to do something for you. I mean, I'll do anything." She gave me a smug, condescending smirk, waltzed her way to where I sat, and straddled my thighs. There is nothing you can do to bargain for your release, she whispered psychotically. You're a contributor to the patriarchy. Therefore, you must be punished. She got off my lap and went back to where she had come from. When she turned, Barbie held a whip with broken metal shards on its multiple lashes. Was this lady off her meds? I had no friends, never went outside my house, and had a pathetic minimum wage job. How could she say I contributed to some insane conspiracy theory? I began to furiously fight against my bonds. She laughed as my struggle was pointless. When an audible tearing sound ripped through the room, Barbie looked at me with such a nasty scowl, I thought it was a man for a moment who had taken her place. You will not leave, she screamed as she swiped the whip at me. Right at that moment, I jumped up and jumped to the right. I barely dodged the blades, with only one making a sizable gash on my left leg. I ran out of her house and was relieved to see my parents' house so close. As I ran, I could hear animalistic noises and running. She screamed at me, and with each scream it seemed to get louder and more guttural. Once I reached the house, I ran inside and locked the door. The rest of the day, I stayed in the living room and hoped Barbie was gone. Every now and then, I'd hear screaming, threats, and clawing at our front door. After 8 hours, the noise died down. I grabbed one of my dad's revolvers that he kept in the kitchen and held it in my lap as I ended up inevitably falling asleep on the living room floor. In the morning, her house was gone. My parents said that they hadn't heard anything that night. I was shocked. My leg was still cut, and there were giant gashes and cuts in the front door of the house. We tried to research it in order to put my mind at ease, but there wasn't any animal out there that resembled what I encountered. That is, except for one. It was a woman who had been attacked and clawed at while she had been asleep. All the evidence pointed to only one possibility. Barbie, that sweet woman that had turned into a ravenous beast, was a demon. Barbie, let's not meet again.